I'll never forget the moment my father looked across the Christmas dinner table, turkey still steaming between us, and said with the casualness of someone commenting on the weather, "Joyce has always been the priority. You've always been secondary." My mother nodded like he just confirmed the time. My sister Joyce sliced into her ham, completely unbothered. And me? I sat there, fork suspended midair, waiting for the punchline that never came. Something shifted in that moment. Not shock, I'd known my place for years. The shock was how easily they said it out loud, how little it seemed to matter. If you've ever felt like the backup plan in your own family, hit that like button. Subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I promise you're not alone in this. Now, let me tell you how I got here. My name is Kelly. I grew up in a suburb outside Phoenix in what looked from the outside like a perfectly normal home. Two-story house, basketball hoop in the driveway, family photos on the mantle. But inside those walls, there was an invisible hierarchy, and I was always at the bottom of it. There were no explicit rules. Nobody sat me down and explained the ranking system. It was just understood. Attention flowed toward my brother like water finding its natural path. Resources, celebration, concern, all of it pulled around him while I learned to function in the margins. Will was described as independent, ambitious, going places. I was low maintenance, the easy one, so self-sufficient. At the time, I thought those were compliments. Looking back, I realized they were explanations for why I could be safely ignored. The love was there, I'm not saying it wasn't. But it came with unspoken terms: don't need too much, don't ask for too much, and whatever you do, don't compete for too much. Let me give you concrete examples. Birthdays, Will's celebrations were events. Guest lists, themes, rented spaces. Mine were cake after dinner with whoever happened to be home. When I turned 16, my parents were at Will's college orientation weekend. They called to sing happy birthday. I blew out candles alone in our kitchen. Education, Will got private tutoring in subjects he struggled with. When I asked for help with calculus, my dad said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." So I did. At the library. With YouTube videos. Alone. Milestones, Will's high school graduation had the whole extended family flying in. Mine had my parents and our neighbor because Joyce couldn't get off work. Will's first job offer was celebrated with a family dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. My promotion to department manager got a "that's great, honey" in passing while my mother scrolled through her phone. College, Will's education was fully funded. I worked 3 jobs, campus library, weekend retail, late-night food delivery, to cover what loans didn't. When Will changed his major twice, extending his degree by a year, nobody blinked. That was finding himself. When I asked if they could help with one semester's housing, I got a lecture about financial responsibility. Career moves, every job change Will made was a family discussion. Conference calls. Pros and cons lists. Advice flowing freely. When I got offered a position 3 states away, my dream job, I mentioned it at dinner and my father said, "You'll do what's best," and returned to asking Will about his company's new health insurance options. By the time we got to that Christmas dinner, I already knew I was second. I'd known for years. The shock wasn't the ranking itself. It was how comfortably they could say it out loud, how little weight those words carried for them when they landed on me like stones. And the deeper shock? Realizing I'd been complicit. I'd made it easy. I'd never demanded better because I'd been conditioned to believe demanding anything made me difficult. High maintenance. Not the easy one anymore. That dinner was the moment I stopped pretending comfort with my place in line. After that Christmas dinner, life continued exactly as it had before, for them. No apologies materialized. No concerned phone calls checking if I was okay. Just business as usual, as if my father hadn't casually ranked his children at the dinner table like he was sorting mail. But something had cracked open in me, and I couldn't close it. 2 weeks later, my mother texted, "Will's moving to a bigger apartment. Can you help with the deposit? He's stretched thin right now." A month after that, "Your brother's credit cards are getting out of hand. Can you talk to him? Maybe help him consolidate?" Then Will himself forwarded me bills. No question attached. Just the implicit assumption that I'd handle it. The old version of me would have responded immediately. "Yes, of course, I'll take care of it." Eager to prove I was helpful, valuable, worthy of being chosen, even if only as the solution to someone else's problem. This time, I let the phone sit. I finished my workday. Went to the gym. Made dinner. Lived my actual life. And nothing catastrophic happened. Nobody died. The world didn't end. Will figured something out, or didn't. Either way, it wasn't my emergency to absorb. That was unsettling in its own way. All those years of instant responses, of dropping everything, and it turned out none of it had been as urgent as they'd made it seem. Or maybe it was urgent, for them. But their urgency didn't automatically constitute my emergency. I started examining my own life with clearer eyes. How much of my income had I been funneling toward my family? How much time spent on their crises? How much energy allocated to managing their comfort? I opened a separate bank account. Transferred my savings. Changed passwords. Canceled the shared credit card I'd added my parents to for emergencies that had somehow become routine expenses. The first real boundary came when my mother called about Will's car repair. "Can you cover it? Just this once?" And for the first time in my life, I said, "I can't." No explanation. No elaborate excuse. Just I can't. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I checked if the call had dropped. "Kelly, is something wrong? You've been so distant lately." Distant. That was the word for not immediately solving their problems. "I'm not distant, Mom. I'm just busy with my own life. Your brother is really stressed. This would help him so much." And there it was. The familiar script. Will's stress. Will's needs. Will's life. "I'm sure he'll figure it out," I said, using my father's old line. "He always does." Another long silence. "I don't understand what's gotten into you." What had gotten into me was the belated realization that being capable had become their justification for exploitation. That knowing about their struggles didn't make those struggles my responsibility. That I'd spent years trying to earn a place at a table where I'd been assigned the cheapest seat from the beginning. If you're starting to see patterns in your own family that make you uncomfortable, leave a comment. Sometimes just naming it helps. And subscribe if you want to see how this story ends, because it gets more complicated before it gets better. The real test came on a Wednesday afternoon. My father called, not texted, called, which meant something was seriously wrong. He had that tone. Urgent but deliberately vague. The tone that says crisis while withholding enough detail to ensure you'll show up. "We need you home this weekend." Family meeting. About what? "We'll discuss it when you're here." Old Kelly would have rearranged everything and driven 5 hours that night. New Kelly said, "I'll see what I can do," and finished her work week. I arrived Saturday morning. The house felt different immediately. Heavier. Desperate. The dining table was covered in papers. Financial statements, notices, loan documents. My brother sat at one end looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. My parents flanked him like anxious guards. His wife Julie sat quietly in the corner, eyes red. Nobody was eating the coffee cake my mother had clearly stress-baked. "Thanks for coming," my father started, which was already unusual. Gratitude hadn't been their language with me. They laid it out in pieces, interrupting each other, repeating the word temporary like it was a magic spell. Will's business venture had collapsed. The bar he'd opened with two friends, the one they'd all been so excited about, the one that was going to change everything, had failed spectacularly. Bad location, worse timing, and financial decisions made with more confidence than competence. There were loans. Significant loans. Co-signed by my parents. Credit cards maxed out. Vendors unpaid. A lease they couldn't break. The numbers kept getting bigger as they talked. Every time I thought we'd reached the total, someone remembered another debt. And through it all, they kept glancing at me. Little looks. Testing looks. Will sat with his head in his hands, the golden child suddenly tarnished. Julie dabbed at her eyes. My mother twisted her wedding ring. And my father did that thing he did when he was about to ask for something big. He leaned forward and lowered his voice like we were conspiring together. "Kelly, you're in a position to help. You're established. You don't have dependents. You've been smart with money." There it was. The reason I'd been summoned. Not for a family meeting. For a family collection. "You can absorb this better than any of us," my mother added. "Will has the kids to think about. Your father and I are looking at retirement. But you've got flexibility." Flexibility. Another word for expendable. Will finally looked up at me. His expression had shifted from fear to something else. Relief. Because the solution had arrived. The backup plan. The safety net. Me. "What do you need?" I asked, and I watched my father's shoulders drop with premature relief. But then I asked the question they weren't expecting. "What's the plan if I don't?" You could have heard a pin drop. My mother blinked like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Julie's crying stopped. Will's head jerked up. "Don't what?" my father asked carefully. "Don't help." "What happens then?" They stared at me like I'd suggested we burn the house down. "Kelly, this isn't a hypothetical," Will said, panic creeping into his voice. "This is real. We're going to lose everything." "I understand that. I'm asking what the plan is if I'm not part of the solution." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears, angry ones. "I don't understand why you're being like this. This is your family." "I know it's my family. That's why I'm asking what the plan is. Because not helping has never been an option before, and I need to understand what happens if it is now." My father's jaw tightened. That look he got when someone wasn't following the script. "Are you saying you won't help your own brother?" "I'm saying I need time to understand everything before I make a decision." The assumption in the room was palpable. Time meant I was calculating how much to give. Whether to pay it all at once or set up a payment plan. How to structure my rescue. It didn't occur to any of them that time might mean deciding whether to give anything at all. "How much time?" Will asked desperately. "I'll let you know." I stood up, collected my bag, and walked out of that house with every pair of eyes drilling into my back. I drove home in silence. And then I made 2 appointments, one with my therapist, one with my financial advisor. Because if I was going to help, and that was still an if, it would be on my terms. Not as the family ATM. Not as the dependable backup plan. But as someone making a conscious choice about how to use resources I'd built without their support. The golden child had fallen. And for once, I wasn't rushing to catch him. A week later, I drove back to Phoenix. This time I had a folder with me. Not answers, documents. The house had that desperate waiting room energy. They'd been expecting me to arrive with a checkbook and a sympathetic smile. Instead, I arrived with terms. My mother had stress cleaned. Everything gleamed with anxious energy. My father sat rigid in his chair. Will and Julie were on the couch, hands clasped like they were bracing for impact. "Thank you for coming back," my mother started, already reaching for the coffee pot. "Hospitality as armor." "Let's just talk," I said, sitting down and placing the folder on the table. My father launched into the story again: bad timing, unexpected market downturn, partners who didn't pull their weight. Will added details about the stress, the sleepless nights, the kids asking why daddy was sad. My mother did what she did best, made it about feelings. "We just need help getting through this rough patch. As a family." I let them finish. Then I opened the folder. "How much do you need?" They exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat. $85,000 would cover the immediate debts and give Will some breathing room to restructure. $85,000. Said carefully, minimizing the enormity. Like it was a favor comparable to helping someone move. "What's the plan after I give you $85,000? After?" Will looked confused. "Yes." "What changes? What's different so this doesn't happen again?" My mother stiffened. "Kelly, this isn't the time for an interrogation. Your brother needs help." "Then it's not the time for me to write a check." Will leaned forward. "This isn't about business plans and spreadsheets. This is about family helping family." "You're right," I said calmly. "So help me understand, when have you helped me?" The question landed like a slap. "That's not fair," Julie said quietly. "Will would help you if you needed it." "Would he?" "Because I needed help with college. With my first apartment deposit. With my car when it broke down senior year. None of those were met with $85,000 and a family emergency meeting." My father's voice hardened. "You're in a different position. You're single. Stable. You can afford this." "I can afford this," I agreed, "because I've lived as if no one would catch me if I fell. Because I've planned assuming I was alone. Because I've been alone." "That's not true," my mother protested. "You've always had us." "Have I?" "Because it feels like I've always had you, your needs, your emergencies, your priorities. What I haven't had is you having me." Silence. I slid the papers across the table. Legal documents. Professionally prepared. My father picked them up, his face changing as he read. "This is a loan agreement." "Yes." "With interest," Will said, flipping through pages. "And conditions." "Also yes." "Why are there conditions?" Julie asked. "Because this isn't charity. This is structured help." I watched my father read the terms. Will's business assets must be sold first, proceeds applied to debts. All personal spending documented for 6 months. No new financial commitments without demonstrated sustainability. Family counseling required, all of us. Written agreement that my name, credit, or assets will never be assumed as available again without explicit advance discussion. This is. My father searched for the word. Cold. Like dealing with a bank. Funny, I said. When I needed support, I was family. When you needed money, I was infrastructure. Now that I'm asking for terms, I'm a bank. Which am I, Dad? Will threw the papers down. So you're punishing us. For what? For needing help? I'm stopping the punishment of myself. For always being the one who helps without ever being the one who's helped. If you don't do this, Will said, voice rising, we lose everything. The house Julie and I bought. Our kids' stability. Everything. And if I do this without boundaries, I countered, I lose everything I've built. Not the money, though that matters. But my sense of self. My understanding of my own worth. The life I've created separate from being your solution. My mother reached for my hand, then hesitated, her fingers hovering. We never meant to make you feel secondary. I pulled my hand back. But you did. And you said it. Out loud. At Christmas. And nobody apologized. Nobody called to check on me. The only call I got was when you needed something. My father stood up, pacing. So what is this? Sign your papers or we sink? No, I said firmly. This is, grow or repeat. Sign these papers and build something different. Or don't, and keep looking for the next person to catch you. But that person won't be me anymore. Not like this. You're giving us an ultimatum, my mother said. No. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice I had to make, keep doing what's comfortable, or do what's necessary. And if we say no? Will asked. What then? You just walk away from your family? I stood up, collecting my folder. If you say no, I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking toward myself. There's a difference. 24 hours, I said. Think about it. Let me know. I left them there, my father angry, my mother crying, while looking at those papers like they were written in a language he couldn't read. Julie followed me to the door. Kelly, she said quietly. I get it. I do. But he's your brother. I know, I said. That's what makes this so hard. But being my brother doesn't mean I owe him my financial future. It means I love him enough to help him learn to stand. They signed the papers. Not enthusiastically. Not with understanding speeches about seeing my perspective. They signed them the way you sign anything when the alternative is worse. 23 hours and 42 minutes after I left, my father called. We'll do it your way. The actual signing happened in a lawyer's office. Neutral ground. My father's jaw was tight. My mother's hands shook slightly. Will signed each page with visible resentment, his signature growing messier as we went. Nobody made jokes. Nobody suggested lunch after. We were transactions now, and that stung all of us in different ways. But here's what's interesting, Will looked at me differently that day. Not with the casual dismissal I was used to. Not with the assumption that I'd always be there. With something I hadn't seen before, uncertainty. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't a guarantee. I was a person with boundaries. With limits. With choices. And for the first time in my life, that wasn't my problem to fix. The fallout came quietly, incrementally. Will sold the bar equipment. Applied for jobs. Started documenting expenses with the grim determination of someone learning a lesson the hard way. My parents sold their vacation timeshare, cut back on their country club membership, adjusted to living within actual means rather than assumed bailout means. Family therapy started. Those first sessions were brutal. My father defensive, my mother crying, while alternating between anger and shame. The therapist, a patient woman named Bonnie, kept redirecting us to the same questions. What do you need? What can you give? Where are the boundaries? For months, it felt like pulling teeth. My father wanted to debate the concept of family obligation. My mother wanted to discuss feelings without changing behaviors. Will wanted to explain why his situation was uniquely difficult. But slowly, something shifted. Will stopped sending me bills without asking. Started with would you be willing instead of assuming I would. My mother's phone calls began with how are you, and sometimes actually waited for an answer before launching into updates about Will. My father took the longest. But eventually, he stopped prefacing every conversation with Will's struggles and started occasionally, rarely, but occasionally, asking about my work, my life, my plans. Not dramatic growth. Not Hallmark movie transformation. Just space. Space where guilt used to live. Space where obligation pressed down. Space where I could exist as more than a function. Back in my own city, my life felt steadier. I focused on work. Got promoted. Slept better. Stopped bracing for every phone notification like it might be the next emergency requiring me to drop everything. The money I'd loaned them came back in installments. Some months were on time. Some were late. I didn't chase. Didn't lecture. Just tracked it in a spreadsheet and lived my life. 12 months after that Christmas dinner, Will called me. Not because he needed something. Because he wanted to talk. We ended up on the phone for an hour. He told me about a job lead he was excited about. I told him about a project I was managing. We talked about a TV show we both watched. Normal sibling conversation. As we were saying goodbye, he said something I wasn't expecting. I'm sorry I took you for granted. No qualifiers. No, but you have to understand. Just sorry. Thanks for saying that, I said. I didn't get it before. Why you did what you did with the loan. The papers. All of it. I thought you were being cold. And now? Now I think you were being smart. Smarter than any of us. He paused. I'm trying to teach my kids that lesson. That family means support, not sacrifice. That helping someone isn't the same as carrying them. That's good, Will. Yeah. Well. I'm learning. 18 months after that dinner, my parents visited me. My mother had suggested it, actually asked if they could come rather than announcing they would. They stayed at a hotel. Respected my space. We had dinner at my apartment, and my father complimented the meal I cooked. My mother asked to see photos from a hiking trip I'd taken. As they were leaving, my father lingered at the door. I've been thinking about what I said. At Christmas. I waited. About you being secondary. That was. He struggled with the words. That was wrong. To say. To think. To act like. It wasn't a perfect apology. But it was something. Thanks, Dad. You turned out pretty well, he said. Despite us. I smiled. Maybe because of you. Just not in the way you thought. The biggest change, though, wasn't in them. It was in me. I stopped waiting to be chosen. Stopped trying to prove my worth through usefulness. Stopped measuring my value by how much I could give before breaking. I built a life, a real one, not a waiting room where I sat on standby for other people's emergencies. I dated, traveled, invested in friendships, pursued hobbies that had nothing to do with being helpful or low maintenance or easy. I learned what I actually wanted, separate from what made other people comfortable. One evening, alone in my apartment with a book and a glass of wine, I had the most peculiar feeling, peace. Not the peace of resolution. My family relationships would probably always be a little complicated, a little careful. But the peace of knowing I wasn't second place anymore. Not because they'd elevated me. Because I'd stepped out of line entirely. I'd stopped competing for a position I'd been assigned and built something else. Something mine. And that made all the difference. Here's what I learned: being second in someone else's hierarchy doesn't mean you should try harder, give more, or stay quieter. It means you need to step out of that line completely. Build a life where your value doesn't depend on your sacrifice. Where love doesn't require you to shrink. Where family means mutual support, not automatic extraction. I'm not going to tell you my family is perfect now. We're not. There are still moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves. Still conversations where I have to remind everyone, including myself, where the boundaries are. But I don't lie awake at night anymore wondering when the next crisis call will come. I don't check my bank account with anxiety about what they might need next. I don't carry the weight of everyone else's choices on my shoulders. I carry my own life. And that's enough. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, if you saw your own family in mine, I want you to know something: you're not alone. You're not selfish. You're not cold for wanting boundaries. You're not cruel for protecting yourself. You're just learning what I learned, that you can love people without funding them. Support them without saving them. Be family without being infrastructure. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever felt like the backup plan. Share your story, sometimes just writing it down helps. And hit that subscribe button if stories like this help you breathe easier. Because you're in the right place. And you deserve to take up space in your own life. Thanks for listening. And remember, choosing yourself isn't abandonment. It's evolution.